Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little fight and give my fight prediction and my little fight analysis that is going to be happening this weekend. And of course, for those of you that don't remember this fight or did not hear this fight that is happening this weekend, because of course, the Gennady Golovkin versus Ryota Murata fight, which is a unification fight at the middleweight division this weekend, so that's probably getting a lot more attention. And on top of that, I may also talk about the very big UFC fight card that's happening this weekend as well. But I'll do that if I have time. We'll see what happens. But of course, the other boxing fight that is going to be happening that's very decent this weekend is the Sebastian Fundora versus Erickson Lubin decent fight at the 154-pound division. Now, the 154-pound division, in my view, it's not really the best of divisions. There's going to be certain people that tell you that it's a very deep division, and I even heard certain people like Dante's Box Nation, for example. Now, we all know that he usually, a lot of the times, is very biased and that there's usually a reason for the things that he says. He says, all in all, that he believes that the 154-pound division, that it's just as talented as the 147-pound division or something like that. And I certainly cannot agree because besides Jamel Charlo and Brian Gastano, I don't really see any fighters there, in my view, that even would be on the A grade level as of yet. Now, when I take a look at both of these fighters, I do think that there is a possibility that if whoever wins this fight, they could potentially get a title. But of course, that also begs the question: would they be able to beat that of a Brian Gastano versus Jamel Charlo? Who knows? Maybe. But I do think all in all that they have a little bit more work to do. But of course, this is a very great place to start. This is pretty much going to be the biggest fights of both of their careers. For Sebastian Fundora, this is, at least so far in his career, going to be the biggest fight of his career, hands down. And as for Erickson Lubin, of course, the biggest fight of his career was against Jamel Charlo. But at the current moment in time, this is going to be the biggest fight in his career because this is really going to tell us if Erickson Lubin can bounce back. This is really overall going to tell us if Erickson Lubin, if he can fight those demons overall of being knocked out from Jamel Charlo so easily just a few years ago. So this is going to be a very interesting fight. Not only all in all to see how overall they pretty much wage war on each other mentally in this fight, but also because this is really a great matchup. And the reason why this is really a great matchup is not only because of the talent level of these fighters, but both of these fighters, when it comes down to it, they're going to be coming in here trying to do opposite things. More than likely, Erickson Lubin, this is pretty much overall a slickster versus a pressure fighter. That's pretty much overall what this fight is going to be. And overall, if you haven't seen certain fights of that were decently great fights, take a look at the Sonny Lara versus Jarrett Hurd fights. Take a look at the Julian J. Rock Williams versus Jarrett Hurd fights. Take a look at Migo Cotto versus Antonio Margarito. And of course, I do think that Antonio Margarito had something in his hand wraps, but is what it is. But that was just one of those type of matchups. Of course, you also had Efe Jagba versus Frank Sanchez. For those of you that remember that fight happening on the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder undercard. My point being is this has been a matchup overall that has pretty much been great TV and great entertainment since the beginning of the boxing sport. So it just is what it is. Because both fighters are pretty much overall going to have different game plans, but they can somewhat do, well, I'm not going to say that they can do exactly the same things, but Erickson Lubin can fight a little bit on the front foot, although he prefers to fight on the back foot. And Sebastian, from what I've seen, he can fight a little bit on the back foot, but he mainly overall prefers to be a pressure fighter. And that's what I believe all in all that they're going to do in this fight. So if you were just going to ask me all in all who do I personally believe is going to win this fight, just based off of what I've seen from them, I believe personally overall that the Mexican fighter, at least I believe that he is of Mexican descent, Sebastian Fundora, I believe all in all that he is going to end up winning this fight. Now, a certain amount of people may ask me, why do you believe personally that he's going to win this fight? And what maybe does Erickson Lubin overall have to do in order to win this fight? Well, I think that it's a winnable fight for either gentleman. I think all in all that both fighters are somewhat on that same level in terms of what they're going to bring to the table. But the reason why I'm going to pick Sebastian Fundora in this fight is because not only does he have the confidence of an undefeated fighter, but I think that it's going to be very difficult for Erickson Lubin to get past the height, the reach, and overall just the all-around size of Mr. Sebastian Fundora. Sebastian Fundora is a person that has very decent power. Now, of course, if you take a look at Erickson Lubin, he has very decent power as well. He's a person that can hurt you with his punches. He's a person that actually has, I believe, a higher knockout ratio than what Sebastian Fundora does. But a knockout ratio is not always actually indicative of who actually is the harder puncher. And at the end of the day, when I take a look at it, I believe that Sebastian Fundora, that he may even be a harder hitter than what Erickson Lubin is. Erickson Lubin, if he is going to win this fight, in my opinion, the only chance that he has to win this fight, he has to really hurt Sebastian, overall Fundora early. he has to really make sure that he backs up. I think Erickson Lubin's game plan, the best thing that he's going to be able to do in this fight is to more than likely fight on the back foot, jab him to the body, try to get that jab off early, throw some overhand lefts when it comes down to it, go to the body early, very early on as well. Because if you overall don't get this guy's respect, if you overall don't back him up early, if you don't hurt him now, I wouldn't say that you need to overall basically blow your whole entire load of energy. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you are going to have to get this guy's respect. And what that means is that even early on, you're going to have to show him the guns. You're going to have to show him your power. You're going to have to show him basically what you can do. And if you cannot hurt this guy the same way that he can hurt you, you're not going to last all 12 rounds in this fight. It just is what it is, because I do believe that this is a 12-round bout. As for Sebastian Fundora, he has to basically hope that Erickson Lubin does not hurt him overall in the first fight, because, or in the first half of the fight, because Sebastian Fundora, he is a person that, even though he has gotten a little bit better with time, he still does have a leaky defense. Sometimes he's a little bit too tall and straightforward for my taste. He gets hit a little bit too often. But the thing that I've seen about Sebastian Fundora is that he has a very, very great chin. He has a very decent chin. He's an undefeated fighter. He's basically gotten past adversity, the best point that he could at this point in time. He's a person that has very, very decent power. And I do wonder, all in all, how Erickson Lubin is going to handle those demons of getting knocked out by Jamel Charlo overall just those few years ago. Now, some people, of course, may say, well, I personally believe that Erickson Lubin has gotten better ever since that fight. Because, of course, certain fighters, sometimes when they lose, they overall learn that lesson and they actually become stronger overall because of it. Now some of these channels, depending on the fighter, like Dante's Boxing Nation, for example, when he doesn't like certain fighters like Vasily Lomachenko or Canelo, he'll basically spread the narrative and basically say, oh, well, those fighters haven't really gotten better as a result. They're just facing weaker competition. But then when it comes to certain fighters like a Wilder or a Lubin, then all of a sudden, it's not the same. But like I said, I'm not really going to complain about that too much, because we pretty much expect that from those channels, because they have a very, very big racial issue. But at the end of the day, do I believe that Erickson Lubin has gotten better as a boxer? I believe that he has gotten better as a boxer, but there's one area that he overall still has not surpassed. There's one thing that he really has not gotten rid of. And not only that, but he still does have a couple of holes in his game. His defense is a little bit more leaky than what I would like it to be. It's not, the worst defense that I've seen. He is somewhat defensive, but he can be hit with the jab. He is a person overall that sometimes will allow certain punches to go through. And sometimes I believe, all in all, that I'm not going to say that he steps his foot off the gas. Well, maybe you can say that a little bit, but maybe he could be a little bit more focused. And sometimes him losing that focus, it may cause him to get hit with the shot, all in all, to where he can get hurt and potentially knocked down. But this is going to be a very interesting fight. The reason why I'm mainly picking Sebastian Fundora is because not only do I believe that the size and the height and the reach is going to be a very big problem for Erickson Lubin when it comes down to it, because, of course, there's a certain amount of people that'll tell you out there that, oh, size doesn't matter in a fight, but those are pretty much people that don't really know what the hell they're talking about. Now, don't get me wrong, is size always the ultimate factor in a fight? No, not always. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why there's weight classes. There's a reason overall why, there is such a thing as reach advantages, being harder to fight taller fighters, because sometimes you have to change up your tactics. And that makes it, sometimes certain fighters consume more energy because they're really trying to reach them all the time. And it's a little bit harder than that of the ordinary fighter. Sometimes, because they're bigger, it's hard to push them off, or it may be harder to hurt them. It may be harder to get to them when it comes down. And when you take a look at Sebastian Fundora, he's very, very decently big for that division. He's not a person that is the most stocky or the most built, but he's a person that, he has very decent power. He's a person that obviously can handle himself. He's a person, all in all, that I believe that the size is going to be somewhat to his advantage in this fight. And Erickson Lubin, once again, that knockout that he suffered to Jamel Charlo, you can tell that he still has not gotten over that. Because in certain fights, he'll get hit and he'll almost completely retreat into a shell, because he almost kind of wonders, I believe, in the back of his mind, oh no, am I going to get knocked out in this fight again, just like I did those few years ago? Because once a fighter really gets knocked out, not just beaten, but sometimes when they get knocked out in a fight, when it comes down to it, sometimes certain fighters, they take it on the chin and they just say, oh, well, I got caught, I didn't overall really get outboxed. So, certain fighters will take a look at it like that. But certain fighters overall, they'll take a look at it and it's almost like someone suffering from a panic attack or their first panic attack if they have an anxiety condition. Basically, if you have one panic attack, you're basically going to wonder and worry, oh my God, when is this next one going to come? When is this next one overall going to pop up out of nowhere, and what are going to be the consequences? I believe that Erickson Lubin, overall, that he still has to face those demons a little bit, and that if he is going to win this fight, there's going to be times where he's going to be hurt in this fight, and he's going to overall, I'm not going to say just 100% stupidly exchange with Fondura, but you're overall going to have to cover up a little bit, and you're going to have to try to go on the inside, suffocate him a little bit, or overall try to tie him up. And on top of that, there's going to be certain times where you may be a little bit tired, or that overall that you may be a little bit hurt, and you're going to have to try to disguise it. And a part of how you're going to have to try to disguise it is that you're going to have to try to push him back, because in the whole second half of the fight, if you end up overall mainly just being on the back foot, in my opinion, Sebastian Fundora, he's basically overall pretty much going to cram you up against the ropes, and he's going to try to go to the body repeatedly, and he's pretty much going to incrementally break you down. So what Erickson Lubin, in my opinion, has to do, he has to show off his power early. I think overall that he has to go to his body, especially early. I think that that would be the best tactic. But Sebastian Fundora, I believe that he's going to do that as well. Sebastian Fundora is a person that really knows how to use his hands. He's a person that knows how to use his hand placement. He's a person that will somewhat disguise some of his punches. He's somewhat decent on the jab coming forward. It's going to be very interesting to see how Erickson Lubin handles that, because in my view, he's not always the best at avoiding a jab. So it's going to be very interesting. But I'm going to go with Sebastian Fundora in this fight. Personally, I believe that he's probably going to stop Erickson Lubin within about 10 to 11 rounds. I don't know how well Erickson Lubin is going to handle with the height. I don't know how well he's going to handle the reach and the size. I don't know how well he's going to handle the power and the confidence of Sebastian Fundora. And a big part of the reason why I picked Fundora in this fight is because I believe that he has a decently better chin than that of Erickson Lubin. And Erickson Lubin can be hurt. He can be caught. So at the end of the day, I think that Sebastian Fundora, more than likely, unfortunately for Erickson Lubin, I think that he's going to be a little bit too much for him. But this is a 50-50 fight. This is a fight that could easily go either way. But I am going to go with Sebastian Fundora in this fight. I believe that more than likely he will knock him out, but we'll see all in all what happens. I think that he's going to incrementally break him down, and it's going to be up to Erickson Lubin not only to fight his own mental demons, but at the end of the day also to come up with the right strategy. Because if you do plan to just be on the back foot with him the whole entire time, in my view, that's just not going to completely work. Sometimes against fighters that are very, very good pressure fighters, like an Antonio Margarito, or a fighter like, David Benavidez, they get very, very good confidence because they see you constantly backing up, and basically you give them no fear because, a certain amount of your punches, you're not putting them forward when it comes out. You're not really putting your feet into it. You're not really putting your body into it. You're basically just trying to survive the fight. And, kind of the same with Deontay Wilder. That's why Tyson Fury was so successful against Deontay Wilder in those final two fights, especially when it came forward, because Deontay Wilder was saying, wow, this dude is actually willing to exchange with me. And on top of that, he's coming forward and he's actually hurting me a little bit. So Erickson Lubin, he can't back up the whole entire time in this fight. I'm not saying that you don't want to be on the back foot here and there, and that if you get his respect, especially in the middle of the ring, that it's not a good thing to be on the back foot to a degree, but you have to gain his respect. And if you don't gain his respect, Sebastian, in my opinion, he is eventually going to stop him. But we'll see. I don't know what happens. But this is going to be very interesting because, once again, this fight could end in a very, very multitude of ways. It can end in so many different ways. I've seen this matchup a dozen times, more than a dozen times, throughout my lifetime. I've seen it with the F.A. Jagba versus Frank Sanchez fight. I've seen it with the Miguel Cotto versus Antonio Margarito fight. I've seen it overall with that of the Erickson Lubin versus Jarrett Hurd fight, the Tony Harrison versus Jarrett Hurd fight, the Julian Jarrett Williams versus Jarrett Hurd fight. I've seen this fight many, many times, and it's overall going to be very, very particularly interesting. But I am going to go with Sebastian Fundora. I think that his confidence, I think all in all his power, and I think all in all his ability overall, especially on the inside. I think that he's going to go to the body to Erickson Lubin very, very early on. I think that it's possible that Erickson Lubin can win the first couple of rounds in this fight, and then I think all in all, more than likely, probably by about the 4th, 5th round, maybe even as early as the 3rd, we're going to start to see Sebastian Fundora start to probably pull out some of the rounds. And eventually, I believe that Sebastian Fundora probably will stop him, but I could be wrong. We'll see. I don't know what happens. It's going to be a very interesting fight. But anyways, that's really about it overall for the video. It's going to be very particularly interesting, but I believe that Fundora will break him down. I think all in all, he's going to throw a lot of uppercuts to the body, throw a lot of jabs. I think he's going to stick that long reach and that jab in his face and then try to hit him with hooks overall, basically trying to blind him and try to hit him overall with hooks coming around the guard and trying to hit him with uppercuts to the body. And basically he's going to try to incrementally and brutally break him down up against the ropes. And we'll see if Mr. Erickson Lubin can handle that. But anyways, that's really about it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.